All right, welcome back to All the Kings Men. It's time for our annual 10 questions facing the LA Kings episode for this year for the 2025-26 season. Joining me now for the first time ever, John Kelly. How are you doing, John?
I'm honored to join you, Jesse. Thanks
and welcome
for
to
having
LA,
me.
by the way.
Thank you. The weather is really good, as you know.
Yeah,
we really enjoy it here.
One of the selling points. And, of course, as always, Jim Fox. How are you doing today, Jim?
Jesse, great. Thank you very much for having me again, and let's get her cranking here.
All right, let's dive into it. So the first question, and it's going to be kind of a big one, and it's, of course, made all the more interesting by the recent signing of Connor McDavid. The first question is, will the pending free agents sign extensions? Now, I wrote this before Anze Kopitar announced his plans to retire, so that was part of the original equation because Andrei Kuzmenko, Anze Kopitar, and Adrian Kempe are all pending unrestricted free agents at the end of this year. That's an entire top line. Obviously, Adrian Kempe is the biggest story, but Kuzmenko is also in there. Corey Perry, also an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Brandt Clark is a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So, Jim, obviously we want Adrian Kempe to announce that he's signing an extension. Anze Kopitar won't.
I'm going to go the other way, Jess.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the guys that you mentioned, Kuzmenko and Clark.
Okay.
One restricted, one unrestricted, but just because I think this year has a lot to do with what's going to happen in the future. I guess you could say that with a lot of players, but I think it pinpoints both of these guys for the reason, Kuzmenko, the numbers he's put up, Vancouver, then a big drop, LA joins the Kings, power play goes through the roof. I think he realizes at his age and now on his fourth team in 5 years that he really liked it here. And he's going to use this year to prove again to the Kings, but to everyone else, that he doesn't want to move around again, that he doesn't want to be a nomad and doing really good on a team, and then he goes to another team and he doesn't fit in there, and then he goes to another team, doesn't fit in there, then he comes to the Kings. Well, he fit in, and I think he's really committing himself more than he has ever done before at the NHL level, that he wants to stay. With Brandt Clark, completely different thing. We expect his minutes to go up. We expect his role value to go up. And if that's the case, he might be in one of those interesting areas, because if he gets 50 points, then he's going to be looking for maybe a long-term deal. If he doesn't, he'll be looking for a bridge deal. And that's where I think they stand with those two guys.
There is a little bit of a different timeline thing going on, though, because Adrian Kempe, obviously, we know that in an ideal world, the Kings would want him to play for 8 more years. Andrei Kuzmenko, if he shows out and has a tremendous first half of the season, maybe you offer him an extension in February or something, because you don't necessarily want to let it get to, and this is a show me year, whereas Adrian Kempe, we know what you're dealing with. And Brandt Clark, they can qualify him, which then buys them all summer to negotiate, so he can't walk. But John, you've obviously been an NHL broadcaster for a number of years. Do you believe in the concept of a distraction? Because I think that's sort of the real question going on here, is with a player, whether it's Eichel or McDavid or Panarin or any of the guys that are in this final year of their contract, Adrian Kempe, does it become a distraction if the guy doesn't sign an extension as the year goes on?
Yeah, I don't think it would with a person like Kempe in particular, really a veteran now who's one of the elite players on the Kings, but also in the NHL. So he won't let it be a distraction. And to me, obviously I'm very new here, but this is a very solid group here with great leadership. And as Luc Robitaille said a few weeks ago to us, is this team is built to win now. So, ideally you want to sign Kempe to a really long-term deal, but it takes two to tango. So, I haven't asked Adrian what his desires are, not that he would tell me or anyone else, but, fans always say, well, sign him. Well, it takes two to do a deal. So hopefully they can, because when you have a team like this with some veterans and some really good young players, you'd hate to lose a guy like him. And I'm not saying they're going to lose him, but he's a key component, obviously, of this hockey team.
Yeah, drafted by the Kings.
Right.
So you go back. I'm just going to go back to Kuzmenko. I don't think people realize how important this year is to his career.
Yeah.
Like, we know what he can do. The rest of the NHL knows that he can be creative and productive. but can he be committed to a team? And I think he's shown that since he came to the Kings, and I think they're just looking for a little bit more of that.
This isn't in the questions, but if we were to rank the top 5 X factors of the season, I think he's a 2, number 2, maybe 1B for me behind Fiala, and we'll get to that in a second. One final question or note on this before we move on to the next question. You said it takes 2 to tango. One thing I keep insisting that people remember is that when it comes to contract negotiations, it takes 2 to tango, the team and the player, but if you bring the agent in, now it's 3. If you bring their family in, now it's 4, maybe more like it. There's a lot of voices that have to be heard in these negotiations.
The agent works for the player.
Sure, but the agent also works for the agent.
The agent works for the player. If the agent does something the player doesn't want him to do, it's the player's fault.
But the agent can influence the player.
The player is the determining factor.
Sure.
He is the one making the decision. The agent works for the player.
Sure.
And the other factor, as you guys know, is that, where is the bar now? Kaprizov signs for 17, and you're thinking, oh, McDavid's going to sign for 20. Well, guess what? Now he signs for 12.5. So obviously comparables are huge when it comes to this type of situation. So, Kempe, he's going to make a lot of money. Jack Eichel in Vegas is going to make a lot of money. So, is the bar raised or has it been lowered now with McDavid? I don't know. Those are issues for people a lot smarter than me, agents and presidents of hockey teams and stuff like that. But it is a rather interesting dynamic when you factor in Kaprizov's deal and now McDavid's.
John, we talked about it on the air the other night. I think it's the most interesting issue now in the NHL. And now it becomes even more interesting about what you just said, 12.5. So way under, different circumstance, looking to win, looking to save money. But there's so many ways this can go.
Exactly.
And we don't have to dive into the intricacies of the CBA, but for anyone who does know what we're talking about, this is the final year that you can sign an 8-year extension.
Correct.
And that
Next
puts
year, 7, right?
Yeah, that puts a weird clock on, if they even want to.
Isn't it
McDavid,
I think it's like 2 days from now. After that, you can no longer, next year's CBA kicks in this year.
it keeps
based on that type of stuff.
getting changed. I keep hearing different now.
Okay.
I heard September 26th of next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
We're not going to get into that today. The next question on our list is, will the Kings get the same goaltending as last season? And obviously that's a question because last year Darcy Kemper came in, his first year back with the Kings, John, gave a Vezina level performance. It seems unreasonable to expect Vezina level performance from any goalie, even a goalie who has won the Vezina, just because it's a level of excellence that's hard to repeat. But if Darcy Kemper slips even a little, now they have Anton Forsberg, who could, if he improves over David Riddick's performance and Darcy Kemper is even close to what he was last year, the Kings should have excellent goaltending.
I think they will. I think that a couple of things. Number one, Kemper isn't a kid, so sometimes goaltenders come up and they're a little bit inconsistent. They might break into the league and win 30 games and then have a little bit of a dip. I mean, he is 36 years old or something, right, Jim? So he's a veteran, and I think Forsberg is an upgrade from what they had here last year. I think the biggest thing to me in watching the Kings play the last few years and now watching them up close for training camp is this is a team that plays with great structure. I think they were second best in goals against last year. So when you play with great structure, and they've added some experience in Dumoulin and Ceci on defense, they have a bigger defense. The goaltenders aren't asked to save 40 shots every night. So they're in really good shape. Are his numbers going to be quite as good as last year? Will it be a Vezina finalist? I don't know. But I do know that the Kings protect the Hellas really well, and that's going to help any goaltender, but in particular 2 good ones in Kemper and Forsberg.
I would look for Darcy played a limited amount of games last year because he was hurt twice.
Right.
I would not be surprised if he ends up playing the same amount of games this year, only because they're going to have more confidence in Forsberg to play those other games. I think there was a point at the end of last season where the Kings would have liked to rest Darcy a little bit more, but they really felt that the home ice advantage was that important. And they wanted that second place. There was a time there, 10 games left, they almost still had a chance for first in the Pacific. But I think they can now use the goaltenders differently So I don't think fatigue will be a factor with Darcy, because let's keep him at around 55 games. But last year, it was that number because he was hurt. He probably would have played more. But now with more confidence in the backup, I think he can keep him right about the same and still get more value and production on the games that Forsberg plays.
And to John's point about not having to face 40 shots a night, over the last 4 years, the 4 years that the Kings made the playoffs, they're second overall in the league over those 4 years in shots against per game at 27.5. Like that, it's obvious. The Kings favor defense, particularly under Jim Hiller, and that will help a goaltender, which brings us to our next question, which is, will Drew Doughty rebound from his injury last season? And that's obviously a question, Jim, because Drew Doughty, when healthy, is still Drew Doughty. And if he's not in the lineup, that's a loss of a Drew Doughty, even if you can have somebody fill in for him. We found out early this training camp that he had a second procedure done over the summer. The Olympics are this year. He obviously wants to make the Olympic team, so that's extra motivation on top of what we already know is an incredibly motivated athlete.
Yeah, I think that there were times last year when Drew Doughty could not even come close to playing the way he wanted to. And that hurt in his defending, because the game now is gap control and time and space. And there's last year, I know, I saw it. I mean, Drew could get in there, he could pressure you. Last year he had to hold back, because if he went at it, he couldn't pivot like he used to pivot. You know, the ankle was just that much. I would say there were some games he was at 50%. When he first came in, maybe 75, hoping that he was going to get better. He got worse. This year, I noticed the footwork back, quickness there. So I'm expecting an effective Drew Doughty playing a normal style game that he likes to play, which is in the defensive zone. On top of you, take away time and space, gap control. And, you know, is he going to be the Norris Trophy Drew Doughty? Probably not, but it'll be an upgrade from last year.
I mean, that was almost 10 years ago. So
yeah,
who among us was who we were 10 years ago?
None of us.
Yeah. John, for me, the test of when Drew Doughty's back or not is when you can hear him screaming and laughing through the glass while you're watching practice. And I heard it the other day. So
yeah, he to me is in the Chris Chelios mode, a guy that just loves the game of hockey. He's a hockey lifer. He's competitive. He was talking today at practice about they were asking him about how long he wants to play. He said, I'm going to play as long as I can, as long as my body holds up. The other thing he told me I thought was interesting, and again, obviously I wasn't here last year, but he breaks his ankle, and then he told me that he played only 3 games in 5 days, and then got added to the Four Nations roster of Canada, and oh, by the way, played great. And his leg at the time was probably, I don't know, Jim's 50 to 75%.
Yeah.
And he goes and plays on Canada's roster. And as you said, the Olympics, he said, would mean the world to me to play in his third Olympics. So, you know, a guy that to me that can play that effectively last year at 75% and make Canada's Olympic team or Four Nations, that's pretty good. So he's a heck of a player, and he looks great skating, as Jim said, pivoting and all that stuff.
You know, he's a hockey savant.
Yeah.
We've talked about it. So he can get by at 75% because he knows exactly where to go. He knows exactly where the other team's going to attack. He knows all that. But back to 100% health or close to it will change everything. Team Canada wants him on that team.
Yeah.
Now, he's going to have to earn it. He's not a shoo-in. I mean, the team's going to be good, right? But they want him on that team. And if he can show that he's mobile enough, you know, he told us he's not going to have as many points as in the past. He's not on the first power play anymore. Team Canada doesn't care about that. They just care, can Drew Doughty maneuver around the ice anywhere near like he could? If he can, he'll be on that team.
I'm glad you used the word hockey savant. I was going to ease John into the fact that I referenced Ted Lasso way too much. And there's a scene in season 1 where Nate the Kit Man is addressing the team, and he's talking to Roy Kent, the captain, and he says, you know, you're old and you're slow, but your speed and your strength were never what made you are. And that's how I think about Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty was never the fastest defenseman. He was never the strongest defenseman, but he's a savant. He goes out there and makes defensive plays that you see other players try to make that they just can't, whether it's breaking up a 2-on-1, sliding on his belly and getting a stick on the puck. I mean, he knows how to play defense.
I I keep referencing it, and I will. The first time I ever saw him, John, was right here. So we're at Toyota Sports Performance Center on the ice. It was first day of training camp. He entered the offensive zone, tried to make a play. It didn't work. Now he's kind of caught, right? He turns and skates right back to the left dot in his own zone, and guess where the other team's trying to attack? Right at that left dot. He got there without any issue whatsoever. He's not the fastest, but he knows exactly. He knew exact. That was the first time I saw him, and then it clicked into me. He understands the game.
Yeah. In an intuitive way, right? Like
Yeah.
And the game's changed, as we know. You know, back in the 70s, the defensemen were stay-at-home, physical, block shots. Now, today, the game is so fast, and the top defensemen have got to skate. I mean, obviously, Cale Makar is a phenomenal skater, but even Doughty at his age is still a good skater. So I think the game has changed, and a player like that who is so smart is still very effective.
Which is a perfect transition into the next question, which is really two questions in one, because I don't want to shine the spotlight too brightly on Brandt Clarke. But that's the intro to the questions is, will Brandt Clarke play top 4 minutes / what will the decor time distribution be? And the reason I phrase it that way is that last year, I don't remember, Jim, if the phrase training wheels was actually used or if that's just what I started saying. But Joel Edmondson and Brandt Clarke were clearly paired together, and Joel Edmondson, because of the style of game he plays, his veteran status, was deemed the appropriate partner for Brandt Clarke's game. And you had Gavrikov and Spence, but then Doughty got hurt. Gavrikov moved up and became the de facto 1 RD for as long as Doughty was out. But now we have Dumoulin and Ceci. Edmondson played more minutes and more games last year than he had in his career. And John, you've got experience with Edmondson more than Jim and I do. It seems unlikely to me that at his age he will continue to get healthier. So then the question becomes, well, if he's not available on any given night, who is Brandt Clarke's partner? We know Brandt Clarke's going to be playing, or we suspect Brandt Clarke is going to be playing second power play minutes with Drew Doughty, 2 right-handed shots on a power play. So the question really becomes, what's to become of Brandt Clarke and the rest of the blue line?
They gave him a chance last year to chew a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And as he progressed, and Jim Hiller talked about it, early in the season, the game's a little bit more wide open. And he produced, right? He got points. He was in the lineup. Then you get to the December, January, and the league tightens up. And then Brandt was kind of caught. Oh, I can't really do the same types of things. So his ice time pulled back a little bit. Then we see him in the playoffs where he scored a couple goals and he's joining the attack. I think he will be top 4 minutes. Again, the numbers he's put up for limited ice time, right? Second best in the NHL last year for defensemen that played under 17 minutes. Fourth best for under 20 minutes. Like, his numbers were really good. I think the biggest change will be when Brandt Clarke doesn't have to play with a stay-at-home defenseman as his partner. When that happens, we'll know that he's arrived. I'm hesitating because Taves playing with Makar, right? Taves is a number 2. He could be a number 1 on a lot of teams.
Yeah.
But so when they play Makar, they don't play Makar with a stay-at-home guy. Taves can join too. Do we have that personnel right now? Maybe not. But I'll be waiting for the moment that Brandt Clarke is not paired with a stay-at-home guy, that they trust him enough to pair him with a guy that might even be able to help him offensively on breakouts and joining those types of things. I'm a huge Brandt Clarke fan. I think people have heard me before. I really, coach has to have the reins on him. I want the reins to come off, but somewhere in between will be good with me.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if the Kings continue to use 5 forwards on the power play, and as you know, Jim and Jesse, early on, teams tend to get a lot of power plays. The standard is set by the officials. So let's just say, hypothetically, in the first 2 months of the season, the Kings average 5 power plays a game, and the top power play unit stays on the ice for 60 to 90 seconds. Well, then Clarke's ice time's not going to get really over 20 minutes, I don't think. So that's number one. The other thing is they have such a veteran group that I think they're comfortable throwing out any group at any time. And Clarke is still 23 years old. And I know that the Hall of Famer Al McInnes, who I got to know in St. Louis, he feels that really until you hit that 300 or 400 game mark as a defenseman, you're never really on solid footing in terms of every night and the confidence. It just takes that much time to be a real solid everyday player. That not that he can't be trusted, but it's a hard, to me, aside from goaltenders, and they're unique, playing defense in the NHL in today's game, because if you go like that, you get a penalty. It's really hard. It's really hard. The game is so fast. So my point is, obviously, he's still a young guy. He'll get his ice time, but it's going to depend on, obviously, other factors.
And it's not going to be on the penalty kill.
Right.
So Jim Hiller was asked the other day, do you trust him? He said, yes, I trust him, but there's other guys that are better equipped at this point to play more. The one thing that holds Brant back a little bit, especially in power play situations to me, and that's something that I think he can work on, is his shot. His shot is not something that, he throws a lot of wrist shots in, which is, it gets it down to the point of, the front of the net. But a lot of teams front now, and you can block a wrist shot. You can knock it off to the corner. You can, so if he can improve, and again, we saw it with Byfield last year. I thought Quentin really spent a lot of time committed to work on his shot, and it got better. Got better to the point where he was scoring goals based on shots, not by moves and not by position, not by strength, by shooting. I think if Brant could ever improve his shot to the point where then he'll be first unit power play.
So this becomes a topic of interest for fans because, and this is the situation the Kings find themselves in. We've talked about it for the last year or two. Some teams place themselves in a position where whatever happens in the regular season doesn't really matter because you're just waiting for the postseason. And the postseason results are weighted way more heavily than the regular season. So you're looking at time on ice for the last playoff run, and Brant Clark's playing less than 13 minutes a game. Mm-hmm. So even if he plays more, even if he plays close to 20 a game during the regular season this year, there's still going to be that chorus of people who say, yeah, but. And that's, and then the additions of Dumoulin and Ceci and the rhetoric that's come from the coaching staff and the players about the importance of being able to play 4 lines and 3 pairs implies and calls back to last playoff run where the team didn't play 4 lines or 3 pairs, and so that just complicates things.
Is Dumoulin considered less of a stay-at-home guy than Eddie Edmondson?
I would think so.
I would think so too. So I'll be interested to see how much Clark plays with Dumoulin this year.
Yeah.
That'll be the start of what I'm talking, where you're playing him with not an exclusive shutdown guy.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, you talk about the playoffs, and fans obviously are frustrated. They've lost 4 years in a row in the first round. The players are frustrated, the coaches, but it's a process, and this is a hard league. This Western Conference is really hard. You can never assume you're going to make the playoffs. So it's first things first. Get in the playoffs. The Kings won their first cup as an 8 seed, right, Jim?
Yep.
So you can't worry about April, in October. So you have to have the habits, the process. You can't turn it on come April 15th. So to me, that's the biggest thing, is to have a good, solid season and make the playoffs.
Yeah. With Dumoulin, I just backed him again. I know the Devils had horrendous injuries yet, but he led their team in playoff ice time last year.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that maybe can play in more of a Swiss Army knife situation back on the blue line as opposed to just being a puck carrier or a stay-at-home guy. He can kind of be both.
So if Brant Clark, if I was to rank him on the X Factor top 5, I'd put him at number 3. But let's get into the number 1 and number 2. And the next question is, will the top 9 chemistry continue? And the reason I phrased it that way, Jim and John, is that when people ask me how this team's going to do, and a lot of fans have asked me over the training camp and preseason, I say, honestly, you could tell me any response, and I think I probably said this last year, you could tell me that they won the Stanley Cup in this season, and you wouldn't have to explain to me for very long how it could happen. I can totally see, if everything goes right, the ceiling of this team is Stanley Cup contender. If everything goes wrong, I can see this team missing the playoffs. So it's just a question of how many things will go right, because not everything's going to go right. But the question about the top 9 chemistry is the way the lines were balanced at the end of the last year, Jim, were so effective and so perfectly combined. You had Kuzmenko coming in at the trade deadline with Kempe and Kopitar. Fiala and Byfield clicked together. LaFerriere was the perfect complement. You had Fogle finding a home with Deneau and Moore, who have been a pair. And those top three lines, I think we assume, given full health, those three lines should be the lines to start the season. And if they are, and if they're clicking the way that you hope they will, this team doesn't miss a beat.
Well, you have the start of the season and the level of competition the Kings have. Talked to Jim Hiller about that today. And I think that's part of the reason that they got down to their 23-man roster probably before any other team in the league did. Mm-hmm. We were down to 23 about a week ago.
Yeah.
And the other thing is what you're talking about. The confidence in the top 9 forwards is there, so you don't have competition. This is our team. And there was a national publication that ranked the Kings' top 9 forwards as the number 1 group in the NHL, top 9. Now, when I take a look at Vegas and I take a look at Colorado, I'm going, there's a pretty good top 9 also. But that stability gives you something. And Jesse, you know, John, when it started last year, we could tell the moment it happened. It went about 3 games in a row, and those top 9 were playing, and that was it for the rest of the year. They were just fixtures. Great insight, I think, from Jim Hiller of rhythm. Rhythm to me can be your personal health, how you're up to game speed. But as Jim said, what happens now if you're one of those top 9 and your ice time comes down 2 minutes a game because he has more confidence in line 4 this year compared to last year? Does that knock your rhythm off? But I still think he's going to put a heavy workload on the top 9.
My question, and it's why I listed numbers 1 and 2 on my top 5 X factors. The real question for me is Kuzmenko. We have a real small sample size with him on the team. And I would very much love for the chemistry between those 3 players to continue, but I just don't know because all we saw was, 30-something games. And then Fiala with Byfield and Laferriere. Fiala ended the previous season with Deneau and Moore and looked fantastic, and that line looked fantastic. And I thought last season, okay, well, that's the line. But it wasn't. They started the season with Fiala, Byfield, and Foegele, I think. And that lasted a week or two, and then they moved him back to the Deneau line, and that lasted a month or two, and that didn't work out. And then once the half season sort of turn hit, Fiala turned around and became just probably the best we've seen him in a Kings jersey, Jim. But the question, John, is then if the season starts out and any of the 3 lines stumble at all, where does Jim Hiller put the priority on? We knew what Todd McClellan's opinion was. You don't break 3 lines to fix 1. But if one line isn't going, then what happens to the other 2 on the top 3?
Well, in my experience, coaches like pairs. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see pairs maybe shift. And it's unrealistic to think that from game 1 to game 82, you're going to have the same 12 forwards.
Sure.
Obviously, you're going to have injuries and players are going to slump and things like that. Or you lose 2 games in a row, you want to shake things up. To me, the biggest thing that I've seen, I like 2 things about this team coming into the season is that they have that stability coming from last year. No changes really up front. Malott was really good in camp. Mm-hmm. So I love that stability. I think it's going to be advantageous coming out of the gates because some teams don't have that stability. So you're going to win some games because of that continuity. And the 4th line has been really good. I mean, I thought Armia was maybe the best player, one of the best players on the ice against the Ducks the other day. So I think when you have that continuity and then you have more size on the back end and you have what should be a good 4th line, it's a solid hockey team. So that's what I've seen from my limited time here.
Yeah, if I were to break up anything, maybe people on the top line, I would move Kempe off the top line and keep Kuzmenko and Kopitar. And then you have Laferriere. He's the other guy. When you need to help some other line, like when Laffy got demoted last year from Kopitar and Kempe, it wasn't a demotion. He was brought on to help that other line, right. And he stabilized Byfield and Fiala. And then I think Foegele the same way. So I think Foegele, Kempe, and Laferriere are the guys that you move around if you need to change up the Kempe. And you'll see it, John. Jim Hiller, he'll do it in the midst of a game. Usually the next game it's back to normal, so to speak, but during any one given game, he can go with a billion different combinations, and the players know that, and they like it, and everyone says continuity, but he's able to, Jim talked to us today about it again. Because of that stability he feels he has there, it's something that he doesn't have to. Last year they were doing system work still, right, at this point. He was coming in, they really tweaked some systems from the previous year. The 1-3-1 was changed, and so this year he has less of that to worry about. And hopefully that'll be part of the start you're talking about, where the Kings can be stable early and win some games early because of that.
And you mentioned moving players around, and sometimes fans get a little bit uneasy about that and maybe unhappy with it. But in my experience, all coaches do it, because what can a coach do when the team is flat? I mean, you can't bench 3 guys. You got to play your players. Really, the only advantage he has is to mix up the lines and things like that. So to me, all coaches do it, and if Jim does it a lot, then I'm sure that will continue when things aren't going well.
I'll tell you, when you're a player and things aren't going well, you don't want to stay with the same guys.
No, you want to
you want to move. And
right.
You'll always say, "Oh, it's nice to know the tendencies of my line mates," and that's true.
Right.
But 82 games.
Yeah.
Mix it up.
One of my favorite sort of behind-the-scenes thing, and I won't mention any names, is if you happen to get a chance to chat to a forward that doesn't appear to be clicking with line mates at the time, and you ask them, like, so would you rather play with so-and-so? Or they go, no, everybody's great. And you go like, everybody's great, okay. But full well. That brings us to our next question, which is, will the fourth line be trusted and contribute? And this was written before Corey Perry was injured, and so there was a Corey Perry, Yoel Armia situation where you go like, okay, these are veterans. We know exactly what we're looking at. Now we've got Malott, or actually in the preseason so far, we haven't actually seen Malott, Turcotte, and Armia, or Malott, Hellenius, and Armia, whoever it is. We saw Armia bumped up to one line to replace Laferriere, and we saw, so I don't even remember what it was the other one, but it was Turcotte, Hellenius, and Armia on the fourth line, I think. But,
we've had a whole bunch of those different.
But I mean, so the question just becomes, since the focus was obviously to bring in depth, to give Jim Hiller more depth to lean on, will the depth be leaned on?
The one thing they brought in was 2 guys, Armia and Perry, that we don't even have to even begin to think about what their role is.
Right. Yes. Well,
until
that preseason game,
Armia can be you got personnel issues.
Yeah.
But Armia can be a Swiss Army knife as far as move up a little bit, but you can't expect him to be a top 9 for more than 20 games. That's just, he knows that. And then with Corey Perry, there's one thing: get to the net. That's what he's going to do. He's going to get to the net. He's not going to dangle. He's just going to get to the net. And that's what I like about the additions. They're not fighting for some new lease on life. They know exactly what they do. The Kings know exactly what they did, and that's all they want to see from them.
Yeah, and to me, all 4 have had really good camps. I've been really impressed with all 4 quote-unquote fourth liners, and we haven't seen Perry, of course. Yeah. He gets hurt in the pre-skates. So that's number one. They're going to have a good fourth line, whatever mix they have. And then come playoff time, it's going to be really important that they're effective, because in today's game, wear down the opponent. Some of these playoff series, as you guys know, are wickedly hard, and you need the size and you need the energy of a fourth line. So I'm excited by what the prospects are for those guys, the 4 or 5 guys that are quote-unquote fourth liners.
Jim, I like the way you talked about Perry and Armia, because I've been telling people that Armia is maybe the first capital R, capital P role player that the Kings have had in a while, where you look at him and you go, okay, he is going to be a bottom 6 penalty killer, although we'll get to this in a second. He hasn't killed any penalties yet in the preseason.
I just look at it as fit. Mm-hmm. The Kings, when they scoured the free agent market and the guys that they felt they could sign for, the salaries they did, fit. I think Florida might be the best example of that. Now they're winning Stanley. It's a different level than the Kings. They bring in Mikkola back on the blue line, and all of a sudden he's a fit.
Yeah.
Well, he was struggling with all these that's all I'm trying to imply there, is that these guys are not expected to be anything other than what they've done for the last 10 years. Just keep doing it. Not more, just more of the same.
And the Kings had a lot of intel on Armia because Mark Bergevin, who was advisor to Kenny Holland, is that right, Jim?
Yes.
Like Mark Bergevin had Armia in Montreal. I was talking to Mark today, and so they know what this player can do. And it always helps when you have someone in your staff or coaches or maybe players that know another player. So he's not coming into and they don't know what they're getting from this guy.
I hope he doesn't take this. He's a poor man's Lehkonen from Colorado.
Artia Lehkonen.
So he can play up, right? He plays up top 6.
Right.
On a team that's as talented as it. But I think he's kind of a poor man, and I hope that's not too much. Where he can show you that every once in a while, and wherever he plays, his line mates love him because he takes care of some of the stuff.
He's a big guy.
Yeah,
well, I was going to say he's also 6'3".
Yeah.
He's a big man.
So that's what you're trying.
Summer of 2024, the focus was obviously on adding uncomfortable type play.
Mm-hmm.
This summer, it seemed like size was the key word. Like they added 4 guys who are not small.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to the next question, which is how will the special teams perform? And I was just sort of looking it up here. I remembered the power play being a lot better once they got Kuzmenko, and it was, but I remember it being better in the league. From the trade deadline on, only 14th in the league, but 23.9%, which was a huge step up from earlier in the season, which is what's important. And the team was, I think, second overall in goals for after the trade deadline and first in goals against.
So that's second.
Yeah.
Now, that's not specialty teams.
No, that's
but it's
all strength, yeah.
That would surprise a lot of people.
Yeah.
Second best. So there was and let's face it, it was Kuzmenko.
Yep.
And where's his biggest impact? On the power play. So now you get a full year of that. The one thing I absolutely love about him is this. When he has the puck on the power play, there's a lot of guys that stand and they're looking for the perfect pass. He might be in the same area, but he's not standing. That puck is being stick handled. His feet are moving, even if it's only So now the penalty killers have to change their stick position, and when you get that movement, lanes open up. The other night, preseason, but he passed the puck through a player. That's hard to do. When you pass through a guy, that means the guy has a chance to knock it down, get a tick on it, and all of a sudden they clear it down and you're starting all over again. So I'm going to answer your question based on Kuzmenko, full season. Power play is going to be much improved. And even when they don't score, they're going to be dangerous. And then the penalty kill, the addition of size and length back on the blue line. That's just taking away lanes. It's taking away lanes. Yeah. That's what you do on the penalty kill, and that's, CC comes over. That's what he's known for. He's known for just playing those types of roles, killing penalties. He logs a lot of ice time in other places, playoff situations. So he comes aboard. Dumoulin, a little bit longer reach. Even if they had to go to Brandt Clarke, and I know there's probably Kings fans are out there, it's Jordan Spence or Brandt Clarke. Well, Brandt Clarke's got probably another foot of reach compared to Jordan Spence. So that's where you're going. You're going with, I said it on the air, it's not strong anymore, it's long.
Yeah.
Long is important. You're still going to have those battles, but you want to be able to take away the lanes with the length.
John, I can't think of a more distinct difference between one power play unit and the next than the Kings' current 5 forward first power play unit and 2 defensemen second power play unit.
It's unique, to say the least.
Well, do you think it presents a challenge to opponents if your second power play unit is such a drastically different look than the first?
Absolutely. And who knows? What if, at some point in the season, the first power play is struggling? Well, maybe Jim Heller sends out the second unit and the other team's not expecting that. You don't know. So I think it is an advantage to have 2 distinct power plays. From what I've seen so far in the limited games I've seen, and some of the players have said it to us, at times this team tends to overpass. And when you have 5 forwards on the ice, sometimes you want to make that extra pass. To me, though, when you have shooters on the power play like Kuzmenko and Kempe, who are right and left, who can and one time Kempe's a left shot, right, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have two
And Fiala.
shooters, and Fiala's got a really good shot. So you've got a lot of guys that can one time the puck. So don't overpass it and shoot the puck and get to the net. I thought the Kings did a really good job at that in the Anaheim game, a lot better than they did in the Utah game of getting traffic in front of the net.
And just, I'm not going to overplay this 2 defensemen on the second unit. Brant Clark on the power play is not a defenseman. When you have this power play, he can skate and maneuver and get around the ice as good as any forward.
He's a rover.
That's exactly what he is.
Yeah.
And just to briefly touch on the penalty kill, I was just looking it up here while we were chit-chatting. Ceci had 155 block shots, which would have placed him first on the team last year, and I think Dumoulin had 109, which would have put him fourth on the team. So you've added 2 large shot blocking defensemen to help out the penalty kill.
You lose Gavrikov.
Yeah.
What did he do very well? Kill penalties.
Yeah.
So find a fit to fill that hole. I'm sure Kenny Holland looked at it and said, okay, we can't get Gavrikov. We tried our best. We couldn't get him. Okay. Now we got to fill that hole, and who fits that role? And he found 2 guys that he feels fit in the penalty kill situation.
Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say, and to sort of wrap it up from my perspective, if you were to give me a choice, give me a good power play or a good penalty kill, I would rather have a good penalty kill. And I think the Kings were really strong in that area last year. So to me, if you can kill a penalty late in the game with a 1-goal lead, it's going to win you a lot more games than trying to get a power play goal late in the game. So I think that the team should feel comfortable that their PK should be really strong.
Yeah. I agree with you, John. My mindset changed on that about 3 years ago, and I can't remember, senior moment, whoever said it, but the penalty kill is more important than the power play because when the power play is not working, the score doesn't change. When the penalty kill is not working, the score changes, and it changes to the negative.
Right.
So that's why. And I never thought, because we spend 80% of the time talking about the power play and only 20% about the penalty kill. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And that's changing me. Maybe it's the way I played. I was an offensive guy. I'm thinking about the penalty kill. Make sure that score doesn't change.
This is something that I'm probably more interested than your average person, but John referenced it earlier. Coaches like pairs, right, of forwards. I was trying to figure out, okay, well, if we assume Armia is going to be your number 1 forward over the board on a penalty kill because he's played over 2 minutes a game on the penalty kill the last 3 seasons, who's over the boards with him as a forward? Because they've been pretty consistent with Deneau and Moore, Fogle and Byfield, Kopitar and Kempe. And we heard Jim Hiller say Kopitar and Kempe probably not going to play as many minutes.
Right.
Suddenly with Armia now available to kill penalties, and what there was also a lot of talk in the preseason about Turcotte, the Kings, Jim, have not traditionally used top or bottom 6 players to kill penalties. Their best penalty killers, Sean, have been their best players, which taxes your best players and becomes a whole issue. So I'm assuming if the Kings start the second period on a penalty kill, the first 4 players over the boards are Doughty, Anderson, Armia, and I don't know. And it'll be different every night, I'm sure. But
if Kopitar and Kempe are going to go down, then Armia is going to get more. He's going to get some of that.
Having said that, if it's game 76 and there's a playoff seeding for battle and it's late in the game and you need the points, Andrei Kopitar is going to kill some penalties.
Maybe, yeah.
Like, that's just going to happen.
I loved his answer the other day, though, which is true. You think about that. Well, less time on the penalty kill, but first up when you get back to even strength, and that's where you might.
We saw it in a preseason game.
I
think it was him, Kempe, and Fiala were the first over the board when the penalty kill was over.
And that's another John will get used to, like especially after special team situations. Jim Hiller, the next line is not the normal line. He's getting guys out there that have been sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
He wants everyone involved more. I think I'm not going to call him a pioneer in that, Jim Hiller, but he's one of the few coaches that has been consistent in that. Meaning, Fiala doesn't kill penalties. As soon as I think he's over the boards. Yeah. Even if the rotation is not Fiala next, he's over the boards.
To me, a good penalty kill, it starts with the goaltender. He's got to be your quote-unquote best penalty killer. But 2 other things I think that good PK units have is you have to have a good face-off man, because if you win a face-off, the puck's cleared. There goes 20, 30 seconds, and you got to have good shot blockers, and the Kings have got a lot of good shot blockers. So, I don't know the face-off numbers for the players. I'm the new guy again, but to me, if you can have a really good, solid face-off guy, you're going to kill a lot more penalties.
And that's where, because Kopi comes down, he's 56%, he's always there. And I think that was one of the biggest differences in the playoffs against Edmonton. They won those face-offs on the power play. Big Draisaitl gets in there with a big freaking blade he has, and he wins. And guess what happened? Now you're in your own zone for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Usually less because they score.
They're the best. They're the best in the league. Let's face it.
But those face-offs are so now. QB says he's been working on it, because he knows he's going to be put in that situation a little more. Deneau, you're very comfortable with. There has been some talk about Laferriere, maybe, if he's put into it, because he's a righty versus the lefties that they have. So I love that you brought that up.
It's probably the area that Byfield has to take the biggest step forward.
Maybe, yes. Yeah. I said that the other day, and I think it was the pregame hit we did on him. I said, I'd like to see him, puck retrieval, shoot more, face-offs.
Yeah.
That's where that's what, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's been years now since the rule has changed where you start every power play in the office. So that gives them even more chance, right?
And teams can pick the side of the ice they want to take the face-off.
Yep. So
face-offs are more important now than they ever have been in the game.
Yeah.
This is purely for me, and I've been asking a bunch of people this question. In a penalty kill situation with 2 forwards and 2 defensemen, and this is a simple yes or no question, is either of the forwards a center, or are they both just penalty killers?
Usually one is.
But I don't mean are you placing a center? I mean, would you call one of the two? Would you say they're playing center, or is it just?
I'd say every coach wants a centerman out there.
All right.
But do you mean after the face-off?
Yeah.
No, after the face-off, they're
just penalty killers.
They're protecting a territory.
Right.
Position.
Yeah. An area.
Yeah. All right. Next question is a lot less serious than the previous ones, and it just came up to me because when Andrei Kopitar announced that he's planning to retire at the end of the season, I can't remember the last time that the Kings had a player. Well, they've never had a player of his stature and his legacy, for lack of a better word, with the organization. But they've certainly never had one that announced their retirement at the beginning of the season. Luke Robitaille talked about the fact that the decision came much later. Dustin Brown announced his at the end of the season. So the question is, will anybody besides Andrei Kopitar wear the captain's C this season? And I mean, assuming he plays 82 games, the answer is no. But if late in the season he takes a break for a game, or if Jim Hiller wants to try it on for size for another player, because we know Andrei Kopitar won't be the captain next year. We don't know if the team will have a captain next year. They could do 3 alternates. Plenty of teams have done it before. But that's the sort of spirit of that question is, does the organization audition for that role?
This will be the shortest answer, Jesse, I've ever given. There's no need to rush it.
Fair enough.
My answer is no, and no.
All
to me, out of respect for Kopitar, and captains obviously miss games for whatever reason during the course of the year, you don't put a C on. You just don't put another C on a player. The other thing is, as Jim knows as a former player, the players in the room know who the leaders are. You don't need a C or an A on your jersey, so you don't need to take a C and put it somewhere else for that reason. And also, out of respect to Andrei, he is just one of the best leaders of his era, so you don't do that, to me.
Great story, and Kuzmenko kind of told it last year when he joined the Kings. And, he's Mr. iPad, and he gets there, and he's talking about all this stuff going on. And I guess he went on the ice, and he made this play, and they got back to the locker room, and, Kopi doesn't say much. Kuzmenko said, I just looked up, he looked at me, and I knew I could not do that again. Do not do that again. You just knew. No words had to be exchanged. Just a little bit of glance across the room.
Right. So then the next question is a standard for us, John. We do ask it every year, and that is because the biggest storylines that impact the Kings in any given season sometimes don't involve the Kings. So the question is, what's going to happen with the rest of the Pacific? You know, if Connor McDavid had not signed his extension that he did earlier today when we were recording, that would have been a huge story for Edmonton and could have potentially, you know, changed the course of the Pacific Division. Eichel still remains unsigned. Vancouver remains a mystery. Some years they're good, some years they're bad. Calgary, you know, surprised last year but weren't good enough to return to the playoffs. So the question is, Jim, what happens to the rest of the Pacific?
Well, unfortunately, the team down the road is better.
Yeah.
So those points are not going to be as easy, and I think we did pretty good against them last year, Anaheim. So I looked at their top 9, much better than it's been.
And a veteran coach.
Veteran coach, winning. I mean, just I'm hoping, and we talked about it the other night, I'm hoping that, you know, that first 25 games, it takes them a while to get into a new system, and maybe that costs them some points early. Who knows? San Jose, better, but I think they're Calgary had 96 points last year.
They missed play a tiebreaker, don't forget.
I don't think they're going to be as good.
No.
I think they're going to take a step back. So if there are points up for grabs, Anaheim's going to grab a few more of those points. I think Calgary's going to give a few more of those points back. Agree with you 100%, Jess. Vancouver, I still can't figure it out. If Peterson is not playing like he did his first couple of years, then they're in trouble. But, you know, I just look at Vegas. Ouch. I think they're the standard right now looking in. I'm making the assumption that Edmonton's roster is not as good as it was last year.
I made that assumption last year, and look what happened.
Yeah, so they find a way, right? They find a way, but I still think, you know, the Kings finished above them last year. I still think that's possible because they've lost some depth. Where are those? I think Minnesota is going to be a little bit better. You know, we're talking so. The way my mind thinks, guarantee me a wild card right now, I take it.
Yeah.
So I don't remember who I was speaking to. I was on somebody else's show.
I think we can be better. I'm not saying I think we can win the division. I'm just looking around going, John, you talked about get in.
Get in.
Get in.
I think that the Kings and the Oilers and the Golden Knights are a cut above the other teams in the Pacific. Now anything can happen. But, you know, you mentioned Anaheim, and I think they will be better. I think they had 80 points last year. But don't forget, Jim, they're gonna play those other teams as well. So those games against Vegas and Edmonton aren't gimme games either for those teams. So, again, Vancouver is an enigma. Calgary, to me, is really well coached with a good goaltender in Dustin Wolf. I think they'll be right there at the end. Whether they can, you know, get in the top 3, I doubt it. But I think they're going to fight for a playoff spot. Yeah. But to me, those 3 teams we mentioned are a cut above the other teams in the division.
The older I get, the less I like the word "should." But somebody asked me, and I don't remember who. Apologies, but the Kings should finish in the top 3.
I think so. Yeah, they should.
But having said that, looking at the standings, the Kings had 105, Edmonton had 101, the Flames had 96. That sounds like a wide gap.
It's not.
Until you realize that every game is worth 2 points. Mm-hmm. So 4 games go different ways across those 3 teams, and suddenly you're looking at a different equation. And to Jim's point, John, last year with 10 games left, I genuinely thought the Kings could finish first in the division. They were like 3 points in 4 games out of it or something. It was close.
I was thinking less about that because I just have a respect for the roster in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So
now they have lost Pietrangelo for the year. That's a huge loss for that team.
Yep.
And they got Marner.
So they'll make up for it in a different way, right? But I'm and I know Kings fans don't care about this, but I agree with you about Ryan Huska in Calgary. If there's a coach that has a presence about him when you talk to him in the morning, you assume that whatever he's saying, the players take back and execute. They try to execute. I think he does a heck of a job there.
And just to focus on Vegas again, Mitch Marner, and here's this word again, should combine really well with their roster and should make them better. But we've seen tons of times across every sport a star player go to a new team that should work, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't.
Well, look what happened in Nashville last year.
Yeah.
Right? They get the Stamkos and Marchessault, and they have a terrible season. So, but they're a way better team than Nashville. That's not even close, but I know what you're saying.
You never know.
You know,
That's why they play the games.
I think Marner is a play driver.
has
Stamkos isn't. Stamkos is a shooter at this stage of his career. So I think for Marner, he drives plays. He creates. He makes it happen. So I don't expect a lot of drop-off from him. If he drops off as far as point production totals, it's because he's going to mold into the team concept that they're looking for.
So final question, just to drag us kicking and screaming back to the Kings. As I said earlier, if everything were to go right, I can absolutely see a season where this team wins the Stanley Cup. But as we know, Jim, everything doesn't always go right. So the question, in fact, everything never goes right. Something's going to happen. Someone's going to get an injury. You're going to go on a losing streak, whatever it is. So what things absolutely have to go right in order for the Kings to make the playoffs?
And I knew that one was going to be asked. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of different areas, but I'm going to try to, I think the best way for me to answer that, what are my biggest concerns? Mm-hmm. And you're asking what has to go right.
So what can't go wrong is how we're approaching it.
Maybe that's just the way it works here.
Sure.
There's not a lot going on in here, but when it does, it's kind of... I'm looking at the goaltending and anywhere close to the same numbers. And there's no reason that shouldn't be the case. Because I remember last year when we got back, I never took more abuse from fans. And we had our prediction of who's going to win the trophies at the end of the year. It was probably like 3 or 4 games left in the year. So Vezina Trophy.
Right.
So I said, we all know who's going to win it. But I think Darcy Kemper should. And I knew Hellebuck. We all knew that. But, I got this black. Everyone, well, Kemper. And I was so glad because, again, the GMs vote for the Vezina. And I've talked to a few GMs, and they say they base it on if I needed a goalie to win one game for me, and Darcy was so stable last year. He was our most consistent player. So even though it's a concern, why should it be? It shouldn't be. He was our most consistent player last year. I just think it always goes there. When things go wrong and you don't know why, it's because of goaltending. I expect the power play to be better. So I'm going to go there. What will get them in? A 82-game, 23% power play. That'll give them enough goals with their defensive structure to win games. So that's where I'm looking for, and that's the value Kuzmenko has to this team. Like, he is valuable that way. Then one player. I just like this Dumoulin. Brian Dumoulin, I saw him, I think he makes really smart decisions out there. So I'd like to see him become more of a factor than he's expected to be. And like I say, maybe throw him out there with Brant Clark a couple times during the season where you're not only looking for him to be the veteran presence, you're looking for him to help Clark with offense, not with defense, just those types of things. So I'm saying that and answering it because I assume everything's going to be okay. The top 9, everything's going to be okay. And I you know what? I love the reaction of the acquisition of Corey Perry. I love the reaction of our fans. I love that because you know what? I know why they're reacting the way they do, but you know what? When Corey gets out there and scores a big power play goal, that's when you want him. And he's done it. And Corey might only play 60 games because he's hurt, and he might only play 12 minutes a night, but he's going to get a couple of big goals. And that will end it.
Yeah. So the question is, will they be a playoff team?
What has to go right? Yeah.
Barring terrible injuries, terrible luck, to me they're all but a lock to make the playoffs. They're too good a defensive team, and I like Dumoulin a lot. I like Ceci. I like their goaltending. So I think they're all but a lock. to make the playoffs. To me, the big X factor for this team, do they have 97 points and just get in, or do they have 105 points or more and be one of the top teams in the West? To me, can Byfield become truly a dominant center? It's a hard position to play. Can Fiala pick up where he left off last season? And the power play. I mean, again, I think penalty killing is more important, but if you don't have a good power play, it's going to cost you some games. So I think those are, to me, some of the keys. And Kuzmenko, if he can score power play goals and he can approach his 39-goal pace he had a few years ago, Jim, right? If he can get 25 or more, then this team's in really good shape. But those three players and the power play, to me, will determine whether they have 98-ish points or 105 or more.
And I have to build on it because we talked about it before everyone came on here. With Fiala, and this might be the third year in a row I'm sitting here with Jesse going, he has to start this season like he ended last. Because for the past couple of years, he would end the season, last 25 games into the playoffs, he was great. And then the next year comes and he's back to the risky, undisciplined, And then you hope, okay, then he goes, last 25 games, great again. At the exit interviews last season, I went up to Kevin and I said, do they care what I say? I don't think so. But I made it a point to go up to him and say, Kevin, you were really good in the last one and into the playoffs. He was really good. Like he was in there and trying, he was everything, and the skill, all that. So I'll credit John for clicking. That might be the thing to me. If he can come and play 82 games he's still going to get 35, even as a less risky player. He's proven he can do that. If he does that, Kings are a lock for the playoffs and fight. I think it's important for the Kings more than other teams. Like Vegas, they don't care. If they finish first, I think the Kings want to finish. They want to win the division. And I think it's important for the up here to prove that they are good enough. I think it's more important to the Kings to finish higher than other teams who are just saying, when we get in, we'll make our. I think it's important.
Yeah, Vegas is a team that can just turn it on.
Yeah,
they're that good.
And they are. But I think it's important. Like, my biggest concern is when there's a down point to this season, and there will be, right? Will the memories of the way the playoff series ended against Edmonton start entering their mind? Will they start thinking, are we good enough? And I think they are. I think they've proven they are. 4 years in a row, right? The best 4 years the Kings have ever had, regular season. And I'm glad they're at the stage now where everyone's looking at the playoffs. So I'm glad that's the way they are. That, regular season doesn't. But I do think mentally it's important for this group to finish high in the Pacific Division.
All of that is why, for me, Kevin Fiala is the X factor of this season. Because if he comes in and plays the way he was at the end of last season, it takes so much pressure off of everything else. Because if you have that line playing well, if he's playing well, then Byfield's playing well. If he and Byfield are both playing well, then Laferriere is playing well. If that line is playing more minutes than Kopitar's line, less pressure, less minutes, less wear and tear on that line. If he's not, do you break the lines up? Are you jumbling your top three? Are you messing with the balance that was so perfectly put together at the end of the season?
Not only the risk went down, but his discipline improved.
Yeah.
He did not take a bad penalty for the last. He took penalties, but none of these retaliation, none of these frustration ones. He was really focused. And maybe that's, if one thing needs to go right, and you guys have led me there, it's Fiala. The Kings can't win with Kevin Fiala being a risky player. They can't. But you can't win without Kevin Fiala. So you need him to play the way he did. And he was outstanding.
And things change so quickly in the NHL that if they get off to a hot, let's say they go 17-8 in the first 25 games, momentum established, balance, confirmed, everything's good. Do you hit a losing streak? Okay, you hit a losing streak. If they go 8-17 in the first 25 games, do you jumble lines? Who are we? What's the conversations about identity start creeping back in? You start asking, what happened? What's different? You have new players. When Corey Perry inevitably returns, is it easier to work him into the lineup if the team is doing well or poorly? Like, there's all these questions that you don't want to have to think about.
I just want him on the ice in the last 5 games of the year to score those 2 big goals and then into the playoffs and score 2 more big goals. That's all.
And run over a goalie or two.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Sure, yeah.
That's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll
To be
be
the
glad it's
Jamie's
not
heart
Jonathan
of the-
Quick
yeah.
or Darcy Kemper.
He's the good luck charm, man. The guy's been in the final, 5 of the last 6 years?
Yeah. So
I think we're going to wrap it up there because we got to get everybody back to their days. Thank you for joining us, Jim. Thank you as always, John. Welcome.
Pleasure.
Hey, thank you for having me. I enjoyed
We'll
it.
check
Welcome
in
to
again.
John, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Kings fans are going to love him.
And for those who are not familiar with the series, we'll check in at about the quarter mark and the halfway mark. And depending on what happens at the trade deadline, the 3/4 mark, we'll update these storylines. And appreciate you watching. We'll see you out at Crypto.